Okay, so now that we've got Article Connect out on the canvas, let's go ahead and add some content. Now, I've chosen initially to do the local CSV approach, and there's a reason for this. This is a big widget, and it has to kind of parse and pull in all of this various data. So there's a couple of different setup options, and they all have benefits in terms of speed. The fastest loading version of this widget will always be a local CSV file pulling in HTML content. The second fastest, or middle of the road option, will be you storing content using a Google spreadsheet, and that's pulled in through the widget. So that's going to be a good option if you want to have your customers editing the content. The slowest option, unfortunately, will be to use the Google Documents setup, which I'll cover in a later video. The reason that one is slower is because not only do we need to pull in all of this spreadsheet data, but we need to pull in these Google Documents as well. So each time the browser loads, it's going to pull these various things in, and it can cause a little bit of a load delay. So if you're going to create some massive system with this, with hundreds of articles, I recommend using the local CSV approach. But it's up to you, and you can test and use the most appropriate method for your site and for your client. So I'm going to navigate to the CSVs that I've already linked up to the widget, and they're just in my folder here. So we've got three options in here. We have one that is using Google Apps or Google Docs as the content source, one that's using local HTML, and a presets file. Now the presets file I'll cover first because it's the easiest. This is a settings file. Similar to what you've seen in Gallery Connect, basically contains all the different settings for the widget. So you've got style settings in here, things like colors, title sizes, padding, space, and over in this column where it says notes, we've given you some information on what each of these things does. But this is the presets file, and it controls tons of settings throughout the widget. Next, I won't save that. Let's look at the HTML local format, and I'll show you what this means. Okay, so when I open the CSV template, you'll see it's very similar in a way to lots of our different Connect widgets. We have about 20 columns here that contain different options for you to customize your content. It's a little hard to see some of them because they're not really wrapping or anything like that, but I'm going to quickly cover what each column does. So let me just expand things out a bit so we can see them a little bit better. So our first column here says Content ID. It's just a number. You need a different number for each post in your Article Connect widget. So right now we have 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, very simple. Next up we have the title of our content. So these are going to be the title of each of the various articles. And nothing special there, just enter the title and you're done. The next column is something called the title slug. And what that means is it's basically the structure of the URL for this post. So we recommend just using the title itself, but you need to make sure to swap out any spaces for dashes. URLs are not good if you have spaces in them. So just a reminder, put some dashes in there in between. You can really use anything you want in there. Moving over to the next column, we have a content subtitle. So you'll see that some of our post examples have a little subtitle below them. That's what this is for. So the next two columns we have are the content category and the content tags. Now these are both options that we've added in for now, but we plan on expanding on them. So we'd like to have sortable categories and filtering by tags. So for now, when you add an element into these different spots, they do show up on the posts, but they're not linked up or anything like that. So more to come with those, and keep in mind this is just a beta release initially. The next up we have is the content leading text. Now this is a term that you'll hear me say again and again through these videos, but you need to understand the difference between leading and full content. So if I go back to our demo and I look at a simple post, let me back out to kind of one of these main pages. When you look at this page that shows the initial blog post, this text that you're seeing is kind of a preview or an excerpt. That's the leading text. And when I click read more, the text inside the post is the full text. You'll see these referenced through the preset sheets as well, but that's the difference between the two. So right here we have the content leading text. So you can enter anything you want in there. It can be different than the content of your blog post. The next column that we have over is the leading image type. So we can store images in various locations using this widget. You can actually store your images on Google Drive if you want. You can store them on any other host out there, so your own FTP or ImageSafe or something like that. And those are just regular images. Or you can have no image at all, and then you just enter no image into this field. Now, unfortunately, because I'm using a local CSV, it doesn't have those nice drop downs in these fields. But if you actually look at our online versions, these are the ones that are linked up in the panel. And if you're going to use an online spreadsheet to control it, then you'll get these nice drop downs. You don't need to manually type anything like that. So jumping back to the local file, that's the image type you want to use. And then you have an option for its visibility. You can do full, just leading basically, or both. And what that means is that your image is going to show up, and let me jump to an example on the web here for this explanation to make sense. We can have our image show up in the leading area only, which would be right here. We can have no image show up, or we can have it show up in both, which means the leading area, and then again, like it is here, within our actual content post at the top. So that's up to you. Okay, next field we have is the image URL. So this is for the leading image yet again, and you're only going to enter URLs here if you're not using a Google Drive image. Now you'll notice that this first row, and let me zoom in a little bit so it's easier to see, but it's missing an image URL, and that's because our leading image type is set to Google Drive. So rather than entering a URL in the leading image field, what you can actually do, and let me expand this over so it makes sense, is you can enter in the Google Drive image ID right there rather than a URL. So in some ways, it's nice to keep all your content together. It's all stored in Google, in the cloud, and it's all loading from the same spot. So that's what these two options mean. The next column we have on our list here is our content type. And this is where we could select HTML, or let me navigate to the online one so we get our nice drop downs. It's right here. Our content type can be HTML or a Google Docs. Again, I'll cover the Google Docs setup in the next video, but for now, these are all going to be HTML. So we're going to use HTML in there. Next up, we have our content for the full content, and we need to enter the HTML in there. Now, here's the thing about this, is you need to enter raw HTML into this column. And if I zoom out a little bit so it's easier to see and add some wrapping to this cell, let me wrap text, you'll see that we've got some HTML content sitting in there, and it's kind of wrapped in paragraph tags and that sort of thing. Now, we're not expecting you to write raw HTML. That's not the purpose of Muse, and you're probably not a coder, so that doesn't make a lot of sense. So what we've done is on the widget panel here, there's an HTML text editor. And when you navigate to this online text editor, you can actually write your content in this side. So write your content just like that. You can add bulleted lists, you could do images, anything you want. And what it's doing on this side is giving you the HTML content that you need. So they have options for cleaning up the content so it looks a little nicer. It's going to move unnecessary breaks and things like that. But basically, you can enter all your content in this side, or your clients could. And then this side just needs to be copied, and we can paste it right into this field, just like that. So that's going to be the fastest and cleanest way for you to integrate your content into the Article Connect widget. The other way is Google Docs, which this next field, it says the GDoc key is for. That's where if you created content in a Google document, you just get a little ID, you can drop it in that field, and then you don't need any of this HTML junk. It's going to do it all for you. The last four columns are for the content author. Right now we have it set at Muse Themes, can be anything you want. We've got created at and updated at fields. If you don't need these fields, you can just leave them empty and they're not going to show up. And lastly, we've got the call to action, or the read more text. What do you want your call to action to say? It can say read more or view full article, anything you want. So that's an overview of the content template. So you just need to work through each column and add your content in. And remember, when you get to the actual HTML column right here, don't be intimidated. Navigate to this online version that we've linked up from the panel, and you can use the simple WYSIWYG editor where you can pretty much do anything you want. Copy the source in, and instantly it's going to show up on your website. So that's it for the local CSV version of this widget. Let's go ahead and look at the Google Docs side of it, which is really cool functionality.